The boy's back was to him. He was leaning over Mary, who lay sprawled on the floor. Grunting, Alan shoved the door wide. "What have you done, boy?" Outraged, Alan grabbed him. "What the hell have you done? Sir, she..." Alan saw the change, the split second in which he registered terror. The crowd surged forward. "Boy, you're supposed to take the stairs. Get away from that white woman." In 1984, I was reading the Sunday paper and I saw a headline in the Parade magazine that read, "The only U.S. city bombed from the air." The article had a few paragraphs about how Dick Rowland, a shoe shine, supposedly assaulted Sarah Page, an elevator operator.
As many stories such as this goes, a black man is accused of assaulting a white woman. From the research that I've come across, they were in an elevator together. He trips and grabs her arm. She screams. He flees. He is captured. The next day, a white mob intends to lynch him.
"Hang him tomorrow. Decoration Day. A nice touch, don't you think, Governor?" Ambrose smiled. "I'll see you lynched too, Sheriff, if you lose him again."
Black residents in Tulsa respond by taking up arms and meeting white aggressors at the courthouse where this black man is being held. A gun goes off, and this leads to days of rioting, and it also leads to the first aerial bombing of a community in the United States.
The plane was several blocks away when one of the goggle-eyed men dropped a stick. It spun like a red baton. Alan shouted, "Dynamite!" A shattering of earth, wood, and glass flew skyward. Flames leaped. Cries echoed from the neighboring street.
And the entire community is torched and burned to the ground. Black people are held as refugees for a number of days. Up to as many as 300 were murdered.
"I'm sorry," shrilled Mary. "This is not right." 2 guardsmen dragged her. Mary kept screaming, twisting. "This is not right." Mary pounded the ground, hollering, "Take me too." Hildy clasped her arms about herself. The truck rumbled on. Wind whipped her hair. She gripped the rail to keep her balance. Mary, like Greenwood, faded from view. Even though there were hundreds, thousands of people that experienced and witnessed the Tulsa massacre, because they were Black, their stories were suppressed and they were not part of the Oklahoma narrative.
Daddy said, "Well, why don't you do some work on Tulsa, Oklahoma? Your grandfather was quite a dapper, a fine man, a physician, and you should learn a little bit about what happened to him and what happened to the community." And he said, we lost him. We lost him to lynching and what occurred at this race riot. There was a riot in Tulsa. And I went, "Wait, what?" What? I've never heard this all of my life.
And I think that reflects a national reality, because even in the early 2000s, people who grew up in Tulsa didn't know much about it because of the trauma of the event and also the calculated effort by the city to suppress it.
One of the first places I went was to contact the Tulsa Public Library And I was told by the librarian, again, this is 1994, 1995, she started whispering and said, what are you doing? Who are you? Why are you asking this? I'm sorry, we don't have anything related to this that you're asking about. She wouldn't even say the term Tulsa Race Riot. She said, we have no newspapers. I can't help you. Click. And I thought, what is going on? No one wants to talk about this?
This story came out in part because of the bombing of the Oklahoma City building by Timothy McVeigh in 1995. And that event sort of opened the doors for this to come out because newspaper reporters and other scholars began to ask, well, have there ever been any other kind of, terrorist activity like this in Oklahoma?
He remembered his crow's-eye view of the town, how as a boy it'd been his glorious kingdom. Pennies from Mrs. Jackson, schooling from Miss Wright, peach pies from Miss Lou, lying man spinning him in the barber's chair. The town gave him love, even, Joe realized, respect.
There were cafes, there were hotels, and we can't even imagine that Black people owned hotels. We saw churches, of course, medical and dental offices, funeral parlors, theaters, dance halls, barbershops, schools.
The census data demonstrates, they were roughly around 10,000 people in a city of, roughly, 50, 60,000 people. So they were smaller groups, right? They were relatively isolated, and that isolation made them vulnerable to white violence. That Black family that had purchased that land and that sold that land to other Black families in the early 20th century, it was all stolen by white Tulsa residents who leveled the remaining buildings and rebuilt another community on top of it.
The Black community, they tried to come back up. And then once again, urban renewal came in later on in the 30s and the 40s, where the Black community was decimated once again. Black Wall Street, as Greenwood was called, never came up to its grandeur again.
Right now, there are still gaps in knowledge and information. So I think finally we start to get closure on, one, the victims, their identity, their humanity. And also we get to have the sense of, justice, who started this and why can't we hold them, accountable, at least in terms of the historical record. Then I think there might be significant healing.
The public acknowledgement, that's a start. Unearthing these graves, that is very much important, but structural material reparations for the descendants and for Black residents in general has to happen. And without that, the city will continue to be politically and historically haunted by this event.
We can't change unless we have dialogue with one another. We can't change until we say, tell me your story. Let me listen to your story. Let me tell you what I feel. Let me tell you how this has impacted generations of my family as a result of this.
Joe smiled, feeling his spirit rising. He needed to help Greenwood and himself rise from smoke and ash. He understood will and magic. Deep Greenwood had been created from Negroes' lives. Fine, Black magic woven for generations, long before he'd ever read about Houdini.